com esse mesmo espírito que eu tenho o grande prazer de anunciar um amigo que residia em Washington até recentemente, que há algum tempo já está em Los Angeles, mas que tem uma atividade em todo o país. Ele pode ser considerado hoje o principal ativista pela liberdade de informações ufológicas do governo americano, de todos os Estados Unidos. Talvez no mundo seja a pessoa hoje à frente da maior parte dos movimentos que pede aquilo que nós pedimos no Brasil e conseguimos, a abertura oficial de documentos e informações ufológicas. Ele pede isso ao governo Obama, ele faz atividades de muito respeito e credibilidade nos Estados Unidos. Ele me convidou para fazer uma palestra em Washington sobre a abertura brasileira há uns 3 anos atrás, fui. Depois eu o convidei para vir aqui para falar sobre a abertura americana, ele veio. E aí nós temos trocado informações regularmente. Voltei para Washington com o professor Wilson Pickler, agora em maio desse ano, levando a delegação sul-americana para um evento que durou uma semana, que foi a atenção do mundo ufológico, que foi as audiências públicas sobre a abertura, que aconteceram no Clube Nacional da Imprensa, a apenas 2 quarteirões da Casa Branca, onde nós pedimos, ufólogos do mundo inteiro, a abertura dos arquivos ufológicos em nível global, que é mais ou menos o que nós estamos fazendo aqui com a nossa Carta de Foz do Iguaçu para a ONU. Esse cidadão chama-se Stephen Bassett. Por favor, Stephen.
Obrigado, AJ. Yes. Senhoras e senhores, boa noite. That's all my Portuguese. Whether it's always obvious, this entire presentation, in one way or another, deals with truth, reconciliation, and redemption. For the last 7,000 years, the kings and monarchs, emperors, priests and popes, tyrants, dictators, and even the odd elected official have ruled by Machiavellian modalities, 2 of the most important being secrecy and lies. But that's not going to work anymore. And if they continue to push that paradigm into the 21st century, things will get very, very nasty. And 2 reasons why it's not going to work anymore are, 1, this, the second greatest invention in human history. How many of you have one of these? Yeah. And the second reason is the most important invention in human history, the World Wide Web, WWW, which courses through this room right now, and through this hotel, and through the city of Iguazu, and Sao Paulo, and Washington, and Moscow, and Bangladesh. It is the World Wide Web. And because of these 2 inventions, the citizens of the realm have more power to deal with the kings and monarchs, emperors, tyrants, dictators, priests, and popes than any of the citizens at any time, particularly to deal with the matter of lies and secrecy. And in its own way, this presentation and everything else that I do, and many of my colleagues do, is to make it possible for those who still rule to to help us make the 21st century work and go well. On the other hand, if things do not change, the 21st century is not going to go well. Some of you are doing well right now, that's fine. But long term, not so fine. But I'm not going to dwell on that. But I will say this, the three things that will have to happen at the highest levels soon are truth, reconciliation, and redemption. And you can apply them to whoever you wish in the appropriate manner, but you will find that they apply. We're going to begin by a short video. On January 17th of 1961, Dwight D. Eisenhower, 14 years, little under 14 years after the crash of an extraterrestrial vehicle at Roswell, New Mexico, or near Roswell, New Mexico, and one or two other crashes. Dwight David Eisenhower, who I can assure you was fully informed of the ET reality, the crashes, the bodies, the technology, everything, well, to an extent, most of what was going on, though he was kept out, we think, of some things, even though he was, of course, General David Eisenhower, gave an extraordinary speech to the American people on his departure, 3 days before he turned over the White House to John F. Kennedy. And what was interesting about this speech is that while at 1961, when American corporations were the envy of the world, making tons of money, and the American economy was ascendant, and the military was, of course, worshipped, defeated the Axis powers, lined up against the great Soviet threat, and all was well, Eisenhower chose to say these words before leaving the White House. Video, please. Obrigado.
My fellow Americans, this evening I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
You have to realize this is one of the great presidents, great military leaders on his way out the door. And at the end of his second term, he says, by the way,
you can close the video.
Watch out for the military-industrial complex.
People know that he invented the phrase military-industrial complex, but very rarely do you.
Three months later, the new president, John F. Kennedy, gave one of the most important speeches any president has ever given. It was not particularly known at the time. It got very little attention. It would be 40 years before this speech came to prominence. And the reason it came to prominence is because many people made copies and put it on YouTube. Now, be clear, his speech is about the Soviet Union, relating to Cuba and the Bay of Pigs and so forth, but in general, the Soviet threat. However, if you listen carefully, you'll realize very quickly that he's talking about much more than that. Because you must understand, when Eisenhower made his speech, his closing farewell remarks 4 months earlier, he was aware of the extraterrestrial presence. When Kennedy made his speech to the publishers, newspaper publishers, on April 27th, he was aware of the extraterrestrial presence, but of course, his audience was not. And I wanted to show this video. And it is the key parts of his speech to the Newspaper Association editors regarding secrecy and its threat to the nation. It is profound. No president has ever given a speech like this, ever. And in my opinion, no president since him is able to give a speech like this. He was a man with his flaws, to be sure. But has anyone since been smarter, more vision, more ahead of his time, more wanting to make major change? He wanted to engage the arms race and end it. He wanted to achieve détente. He wanted to go to the moon. He wanted the ET information brought to his desk to address it and maybe bring it to the public. He wanted to get out of Vietnam. That's about the agenda of the last 5 presidents. But he didn't get to do that. If you have an opportunity, you can simply go on YouTube and you can search on Kennedy secrecy, and you'll find 20 or 30 versions of this speech. And I encourage you to listen to it. And you probably appreciate it as much as I, because he said this in '61, and all of the things he warned about, every single one has come true, has manifest in spades, maybe worse than he even imagined. Vision is not enough. You have to have the support of the people and engagement, action, and reform. Otherwise, all you're left with is vision and no outcomes. He did not get a chance to convert his vision into policy, and no one since has even dared to follow in his footsteps. The truth is that secrecy plus lies equals toxic poison. Toxic poison to the social contract. Secrecy in and of itself, dangerous, and to a great extent, possibly fatal. Lies, always dangerous, but not necessarily fatal. All of us have told some lies in our life to good cause, or to preserve ourselves, particularly, with regard to your spouses. But when you combine them, secrecy and lies, do that in a marriage, get a divorce lawyer. Do that in a nation, have a revolution. That's what's going on in the United States. The secrecy and lies have piled up to the point where the toxic poison, the toxic result, is approaching lethal levels. And you are literally seeing the body politic of the United States suffer gradual organ failure, kind of the throes of death that every human goes through. Ultimately, you always die, and everyone dies from the same thing: multiple organ failure. It happens to people, and it happens to body politics. So, let's see how I'm going to approach this. I'm as excited as you to find out. First, everything that we are talking about comes back to this. This is at the center of, I think, this entire conference and every other conference, but particularly this presentation, and of course its disclosure, which is defined there for you. People can interpret the term as they wish, but this is the definition of the advocacy movement. It's pretty simple: formal acknowledgement by the world's government of a non-human extraterrestrial intelligence engaging the human race. It'll be official for you when President Rohak comes forward and tells you that. Official for the Russians when Putin tells them that. Official for the Americans when Barack Obama tells them that. That's disclosure. It's an event. It could take 5 minutes or less. And it's the focus of the entire advocacy movement. And with respect to disclosure, you can divide all of history, going back to the Big Bang and going forward to the sun finally melting the Earth in about 5 billion years, to two halves, the pre-disclosure world and the post-disclosure world. And in case you were wondering, you live on that little red line in the middle of the slide. Right? That's where we exist. The reason we're still on that red line and not in the post-disclosure world is the truth embargo. The truth embargo is the formal policy of the United States government with the cooperation of its allies and the de facto cooperation of other countries, generally in the sphere of influence of the United States, and unofficially with the cooperation of the People's Republic of China, the Soviet Union, and Russia, but not for the same reasons, to withhold the acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence, which has been the focus of several thousand conferences, thousands of books, hundreds of documentaries, yada, 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 for 67 years, all right, to withhold that acknowledgement from the people, which would be a lie, all right? I mean, it's government policy. There, it's a legal lie, but a lie that it is. And like all lies, particularly, it's bad enough when you just lie to your spouse about where you were on Thursday, and by the next Thursday, you've already had to tell 10 more lies to back that one up. Imagine lying about the nature of the galaxy to hundreds of millions of people. You've got to lie like crazy, day in and day out. You've got to come up with all manner of things in order to keep that one holding up. And they have for 67 years. The truth embargo. The end of the truth embargo will, of course, be disclosure. Now, as I've said many times, all political activism is a chess game between the activist community and a government, state, local, federal, one day galactic, I suppose. Hopefully it's a nonviolent chess game. The truth advocacy movement for ET disclosure has been generally a nonviolent chess game. The odd person has met their demise, yes, but not many. It's just a casual weekend in Chicago, about that many, if not less. So I'm grateful for that. But a chess game it is. And always in the beginning, the government has more pieces, more money, more power, more influence than the activists. And the activists spend years trying to gather pieces for the board, waiting for the government to lose a piece through this or that circumstance. And slowly, they take control of the center board. And eventually, they push the government into a corner and checkmate it. And when that happens, policy changes. Women get the right to vote. India sees the British depart. African Americans see the Civil Rights Act. Right? Gays give the right to marriage. And every country with a long history can think of a number of these things. But always, the government had to be checkmated before it happened. You just didn't put in a request, and they came back and said, what a wonderful idea. We're going to take care of that right away. Because every activist movement in all of history has always involved state authorities giving up a portion of their power. And in the old paradigm reality, going back to Summer, 7,000 years ago, giving up authority is not acceptable under that paradigm. It will be in the coming paradigm, because it has to be, all right? But not heretofore. And so the chess game continues. The point that I'll make tonight is that after 67 years of awareness and now 21 years of growing advocacy since the end of the Cold War, we are about to checkmate the United States government into getting what we want. On September the 22nd, Paradigm Research Group submitted a petition to the White House Not just any petition, it was a petition to the White House's own program called We the People. Send us your petitions, get 5,000 signatures, and we'll give you a prize, namely a formal response from the White House. Populist democracy. The second petition submitted was this one, Disclosure Petition 1. We, the undersigned, strongly urge the President of the United States to formally acknowledge an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race, immediately release to the public domain all files from government or agency and military services related to the phenomena. This is the key issue, the key question. Disclosure Petition 1. Within 8 days, it had 5,000 signatures. Ultimately, it got 12,000 signatures. And thus, it earned a response from the White House. It's notable that 5 days after this petition achieved that 5,000 signature threshold, they raised the threshold to 25,000. On October the 4th, the response from the White House came. It is notable for 3 reasons, but first, the response. Rather amazing, actually. This is from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the White House Science Office, headed by Dr. John Holdren, and I can assure you Barack Obama reviewed every word before it was put on the White House website. The U.S. government has no evidence that any life exists outside our planet, 1, or that an extraterrestrial presence has engaged any member of the human race, 2. In addition, there is no credible information to suggest that any evidence is being hidden from the public eye. Yeah, I know. Contain yourself. Now, this formal response is notable for 3 reasons. 1, it is completely false. It's a lie. Not if you really didn't know it, but it's a lie. It's completely false. 2, and this is very important. It's a distinction not without a difference. It is indefensibly false. Now, for those who are married, I've never been, but I have married friends. You know the difference between telling your spouse, a defensible lie, right? When challenged, you have the goods. You can hold up, as opposed to an indefensible lie, whereas when challenged, you fold up like a card table, and then bad things happen. The third and most profound reason why this is remarkable is that it is the first time in the history of the phenomena that the executive branch of the United States government ever put its position on the extraterrestrial issue in writing. And there's a good reason for that. You don't want to put it in writing. So you can pretend you don't know, you have no opinion, you dodge and weave, don't bother me with this, why is this important, et cetera, et cetera. The moment you put it in writing, it is a fixed target to be attacked from all sides, shredded, and stuck back in your nose. So they haven't done it until October the 4th of 2011. That was PRG's first move in the final endgame that we're playing. By the way, because the petition received a response and got the necessary signatures, it remains on the White House website to this day, 2 years now, for anyone in the world to come and see and read. Now, having made that move, the next move the PRG did was logical. From October 4th, 2011 going forward, the game plan was shove as much evidence in front of the political press that the White House says doesn't exist until the political press finally go, these both can't be true. Somebody must be lying. If it's the White House, that's news. Let's cover it, or whatever. And so over the coming months, we submitted 4 more petitions. You can see them up there. A disclosure petition 2. This is a website, by the way. 3, 4, and then 5 will come out soon. Oh, obrigado. Thank you. life is good. And these petitions were designed to point out key evidence. I'm not going to read them all to you, but they were obvious, pointing out key evidence. Now, remember, the threshold was 25,000 signatures now, and people were getting petition weary. PRG did not have the budget to do heavy marketing, so we didn't reach 25,000, and the petitions remained up for 30 days and then came down. No problem. All right? But nevertheless, that plus media appearances, articles in the paper, whatever, for that next 18 months, my focus was shoving that evidence out there. The White House says this doesn't exist, but yet here it is, right in front of your nose. It's funny how the White House has a bad tendency of late. It's perhaps not, maybe it's been as bad in the past, but it seems that 1 year the White House is telling you things exist when they don't exist, like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And then the next year they're telling you things don't exist when they do exist. That would be extraterrestrials. You can see the problem here. And guess what? This trait is not confined to extraterrestrials and weapons of mass destruction. Now, again, I'm kind of speaking to you like you are an American audience who would instantly sense what I'm saying. But I am willing to speculate the Brazilian government, on occasion, has been mendacious about this or that and said things existed when they didn't and didn't exist when they did. It is a trait of all governments. So I don't want to totally pick on the U.S. And so it went for 18 months until the next planned move could take place. And that move was the citizen hearing. And the reason it took 18 months is because the money to put it on wasn't there. It didn't arrive until about 17 months after the White House response. A very polite Canadian, of course they're all polite, provided $1.1 million in a movie deal so we could put the event on and make a movie, which hopefully will pay it all back. And so we held the citizen hearing on disclosure. What was it? Well, here was the mission statement of it. The citizen hearing, this is the full name, by the way, right? I know that South America likes long names. Well, this is the full name of this event. The citizen hearing on disclosure of an extraterrestrial presence engaged in the human race will attempt to accomplish what the Congress has failed to do for 45 years, seek out the facts surrounding the most important issue of this or any other time. And the motto of this event was, if Congress will not do its job, the people will. What we did was bring 40 witnesses from 10 countries to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. on F Street, 2 blocks from the White House and 14 blocks from the Congress on Capitol Hill. These witnesses testified for 5 days, 30 hours, in 20 sessions to 6 former members of Congress, whom you see here. Pretty representative of the American people. 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 1 Libertarian, 3 men, 3 women. There were 2 assistants to the committee, Daniel Sheehan and Dr. Joseph Buckman. The witnesses, again, this is from the citizenhearing.org website, right? Included gentlemen like this, including one very distinguished gentleman in the second row, third from the left. Flew all the way up to Washington, D.C. The entire witness group was 40. You're seeing some here, more here. It was the largest assemblance of witness evidence on this subject ever in one place, ever at any time, going back to the flood. You can see here the committee taking the testimony, which was given under oath, a non-legal oath. And this hearing was designed to look as much like real congressional hearings, Senate and House, as possible. And many people thought they were real hearings. that happened to watch it on the webcast, because we webcast it to the world. And to any members of Congress who didn't have the courage to come on down and see it in person, or any editor or reporter that was afraid to come down and they could watch it in the comfort and safety of their home, it was webcast. It was also filmed by two camera crews in high definition. This is another view of the citizen hearing on disclosure. And so, having completed that, the next move by PRG is intended to be the last move. There might be one more little move, but pretty much this is the last move before checkmate is achieved. And what is this? The Congressional Hearing Initiative, which will begin, I'm pretty confident now, on January the 8th of 2014. What's going on there? Well, hearings are very important in the United States. There have been many of great renown. There are countless hearings that go on, mostly routine business. There are hearing rooms in the Senate and the House buildings. Most, you don't hear about them, but some achieve global prominence. Some of the most famous, of course, include the Army MacArthur hearings of the 1950s, when Senator McCarthy tried to pull a stunt that a couple of other people have tried to pull in the last 10 or 15 years. Doesn't work, didn't work then. And let me tell you, these were big, enormous coverage, even though there were only 3 networks at the time, and black and white, but nevertheless seen all over the world. And then, of course, the Watergate hearings. Most of you know that. There is John Dean. Iran-Contra. That was a rather pageant moment there, a moment of pageantry. And then, of course, we have hearings for Supreme Court nominees, which in our country can get rather interesting. There's another one. This is, by the way, the Hart Senate Committee room. Recently, we had tobacco and health hearings, pretty important, and then now we're having a series of hearings on Benghazi. And the last time there was a hearing on the extraterrestrial issue, which polls showed that 50% of the world's people believe is real. 90% of the world's people believe there is definitely life somewhere in the universe. 50% believe it's already here. 85% believe their governments are lying. And about 5 to 7% say they're already having contact with extraterrestrials. When was the last time the Congress had a hearing on that? 1968. 45 years ago. And there's a very good reason for that, which I'll tell you in a moment. So what's about to happen is we're about to go back to the Hill. Now, this is a cartoon by Dennis Reno. That's a pretty good likeness of me. I'm not gonna shy away from it. But I love this one. He has me carrying a truth serum syringe towards the White House. And I have added the caption. Now, some of you may or may not have seen the movie Jaws, right? It's been around a long time. If you haven't seen it, Netflix. But that is a play on that quote from Jaws. We're going to need a bigger syringe. So I'm going back to the Capitol for the first time in 13 years. And what I mean by that, I visited it, but I haven't gone back as a lobbyist. I am a registered lobbyist in the House and Senate on this issue. I am the only registered lobbyist on this issue. Though it's been 16 years since I registered, and I thought maybe there might be a few others by now. But apparently the pay is not good enough for them, right? They can make millions lobbying for fracking companies or whatever. But I'm going back to Capitol Hill. I've had my wardrobe tailored. You see the results here. I'm going to dress not like Marina Del Rey, where I hang out now a little bit, but like a lobbyist. And I'm going to deal with the senators and congresspeople up there in a highly public and organized way. And the reason that I'm doing this, there's actually 2 reasons that I'm actually going to do this, and there's 2 reasons why it's going to succeed. First and foremost, the reason why there have not been hearings since 1968 in the U.S. Congress is relative to what happened in the citizen hearing on disclosure. And what happened is that the 6 former members of Congress, with 80 years of tenure between them, 5 in the House, 1 in the Senate, came into the citizen hearing in a neutral frame of mind with minimal knowledge of the extraterrestrial issue and no particular bias one way or the other. And by the end of the week, they wanted to charge the Pentagon and demand the books, the files, help in whatever way they could. And one of the ways we'll talk about tonight. They were transformed. In fact, most of them were already on board by the afternoon of the first day. You've got to tell them a big truth. And it would help if it was a nonpartisan truth, so you don't get into the hyper-partisan blatherfest. Boy, that's not going to translate easily. That has marked the U.S. Congress of late. I have the biggest truth in history, and it's nonpartisan. And all you have to do is sit in your chair and listen to the witnesses. You don't even have to open your mouth. You don't have to proclaim your views. You don't have to confess your contact experiences. Just sit and listen to the witnesses. And watch how fast the praise and accolades pour in after the initial shock from all around the world. That's a powerful message. And while they may want to argue against it, they have no argument. And so, for that reason, and also by the cooperation of citizens, by the way, let me add a few more things. The DVD sets will be accompanied by a letter signed by most of the CHD witnesses and other witnesses asking for hearings and to meet with me. 2 or 3 weeks later, another letter will be sent to the committee chair people, signed by former members of Congress, specifically to the chairperson asking for hearings. Eventually, I will publish a list of all of those offices which have declined to meet, and I will go public in the usual fashion and request that everybody contact everybody on that list, every office on that list, politely and respectfully requesting that they reconsider. What I'm saying is that from January 8th to the end of February, we are going to do a full-fledged, broad-spectrum, international public blitz of the United States Congress demanding that they do the hearings that they haven't done for 45 years for military, agency, and political witnesses, the evidence of that testimony confirming the extraterrestrial presence. And I believe we're going to get it. If we get those hearings in March, the truth embargo will end sometime in April. The popular involvement will be orchestrated from a website called factsonwashington.org. This is the cover page. And we'll have information there, how to find your contact, your representative, and so forth. Whether you're American or living in Bangladesh, doesn't matter. And so that will be that move in the chess game. Now, before we continue, I have been told by the highly competent tech people here that the JFK video is ready to go. So let's double back. It's a good time to do this, right? You kind of know what we're up to. You kind of know where we're going. Now let's listen to what JFK said in 1961.
Gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as the people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Okay, thank you. Back to the slides. Did Lyndon Johnson hear this message? He did not. Did Richard Nixon hear this message? He did not. Bill Clinton, who worshiped Kennedy, heard the message, but he was blocked. Did George W. Bush hear this message? He did not. George H.W. Bush hear this message? He did not. Did Barack Obama hear this message? Maybe, but he didn't act on it. Did the political media hear this message? They did not. And in the 52 years since he made that message, you have seen the United States in decline, being slowly poisoned by lies and secrecy. And one of the reasons for those lies and secrecy and for the vast structures that were created to put them forward was the extraterrestrial presence, which the government denied, and though the American people then overlooked and didn't understand. They thought the Soviet Union was the only issue, and once it was resolved, we would move on. But it wasn't the only issue. There was another one even bigger than that, and that issue remains unresolved. And so the security state apparatus in the United States grows larger, not smaller. It is bigger than anything the Soviet Union even dreamed of. It is vast, and we cannot control it. The Congress can't deal with it. The president can't access it. And so we are in danger up there. Pray for us. Now, that also took me back to the beginning, but that's all right, because I have a very, very flexible thumb. I'm moving here. Here we go. Come on. Aha! Did that. Okay. Also going on is that the movie that is built somewhat around the citizen hearing on disclosure is continuing, and we hope to have it done. We have to raise another $250,000. We hope to have it done and out by April, which would coincide with other things. The website is truthendembargomovie.com. This is, there's a nice little banner. And this is the website, truthendembargomovie.com. That's more of the front page, and then this is the funding campaign that we have underway. Crowdfunding, some of you probably know about that. What else is going on? That brings us to the Citizen Hearing Foundation, which brings me to the key reason why I'm here. And so let's get into that. Citizen Hearing Foundation, what's going on with that? Okay, let's recall. Or let's not recall, but let me add. Remember, the Congress hasn't held a hearing since 1968. The UN last addressed this issue in 1978, when Edmund Gary was prompted by a number of individuals to bring the issue to the General Assembly for a resolution. Edmund Gary, being the prime minister of a rather small country, Grenada, we invaded them too. There's hardly anybody we haven't invaded at some point. He came, and with the assistance of people such as, starting on the left, astronaut Gordon Cooper. After him, on the left, is Dr. Jacques Vallée. And then two more down, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Then you have, of course, Prime Minister Edmund Gary. Then you have Kurt Waldheim, the Secretary General. Coming up the right side, Claude Boher, who is still involved in this issue, by the way. And then the rather young, youthful, bearded gentleman is Lee Spiegel, who is also involved in this issue to this day, writing a very important column for the Huffington Post. And they met in 1978. I don't know if this was Waldheim's, Gary's first or second visit. I do know that on his second visit to complete this resolution process, it just coincidentally happened that he was overthrown back in Grenada, and I don't think was able to return for some time. I'm sure the CIA had nothing to do with that. It was just one of those things. But there was no way that the UN was going to be allowed into this issue in 1978. So they set up a commission. And here is the actual document that was submitted to the UN. I would normally read it, but I don't have my computer. It was Resolution 33-426, 1978. And they did set up a commission which then did nothing. And it has done nothing since 1978. So that was the UN. Now, by midweek of the citizen hearing, around May 1, the former members of Congress were hot to go. They wanted to see some developments. and they seemed to think the UN was a target. So they wanted to approach the UN. So we got together, and Senator Mike Gravel wrote a communique, which was then reviewed by the other members. Some changes were made. And this is that communique, signed by 4 of the committee. 2 of the representatives had just retired from the House and were in what is called a 1-year quiet period, where they weren't allowed to do things like approach the UN and so forth. That quiet period ends on January the 3rd. And this communique called for Paradigm Research Group to set up a nonprofit organization to pursue a joint resolution to the General Assembly of the United Nations calling on or for a world conference, UN-backed world conference, on the evidence and the witnesses indicating an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. And we decided, okay, we'll do that. And the foundation that we set up, well, actually the nonprofit is called the Citizen Hearing Foundation, and it is operating now. It is fully accredited and operating now. The website is citizenhearingfoundation.org. And this is the website here. And this is the mission statement, essentially. Well, actually, no, this is the Congressional Hearing Initiative. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to raise money, hopefully $1 million, but $250,000 would be good. We can raise it from any human being, any organization in the world. If you're an American or if your country has reciprocal nonprofit status with the U.S., and there are some countries that do, these donations would be tax deductible, which really matters when you're talking about very large donations. And that money is going to be used to fund approaches within about a dozen countries to the executive branch, with the intention of the executive branch calling on their UN ambassador to exchange correspondence with the other countries involved to agree on a specific language for a single resolution to be submitted to the General Assembly, which, if it arrives with 5, 6, 7 sponsors, including nations of substantial development size, has a very good chance of passing. That is the UN Resolution Initiative. That is the mission statement. We have sponsors. We're hoping to get more sponsors, corporate, whatever, that want the truth out. Add those. And I seem to have missed a page, but we have a board of advisors. Currently there are 2, Senator Mike Gravel and Attorney Daniel Sheehan. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to add about 10 to 12 more advisors. A.J. Gavard will almost certainly be one of them. Many of these advisors will be researchers in certain countries, and they will be the leader in approaching the executive within their country, and we will provide funding to them to do this. We will open up an office near the UN. Now, the countries that we are targeting initially, the majority of them are in South America and Central America. Mexico, Argentina, Peru, Uruguay, Brazil, also Portugal, possibly Canada. San Marino, because even the little countries deserve to be part of this. And we'll see what happens. Who knows? We might get a response from many countries that will proactively want to engage this. But these are the initial countries that we will set up, I guess you could say, in-country operations to approach the executive offices. So where is all this leading? Assuming we survive this next 10 to 15 years. And what I mean by survive is not that everyone goes down the drain, but most of the world's population goes into great suffering while the few elite, I assume, move into space to live there. I encourage you to go and watch the movie Elysium with Brad Pitt. It is classic, great science fiction, and it is a superb political statement. Elysium, I don't know if it's still in the movies, Netflix. Watch it. Some of it was filmed in your country. But I can only say that while some may do well, it's going to go badly for your kids and grandkids. We're right at the edge of the limits of human imagination under the old paradigm thinking. We either change the paradigm, alter our worldview, or the same people are going to take us to the same place they've been taking us for the last 7,000 years. And that place always involves a war between somebody. War after war after war, endless war. And in the United States, that's very real. Down here, not so real. Let us count all the times over the last 45 years that a South American country went to war with another South American country. How many times has that happened? I don't think it's happened even once. Though a country did go to war against Argentina. That was, I'll count that one sort of, but not in South America. That was up there. So there's a whole lot of peace down here. There's some rebels and some guerrillas, I understand that, but that's trivial compared to what we consider war where I come from, right? And so we have a decision to make. Europe has been making some progress. The United States has not. The Middle East has not. The Balkans has not. And to some degree, parts of Asia. And the message they need to hear, among so many other things, is that consider being more like South America for a couple of decades and see how that goes for you. Might work out pretty well. So you can kind of see the dynamic here. If we can, oh, and then I'll close with this. Having said that, there's no question that in order for disclosure to take place and for a post-disclosure world to evolve that will serve all nations and all peoples, and not just the elite and their unbridled, limitless greed, a lot of people in this paradigm are going to have to provide the truth. They're going to have to reconcile with their people, and if they do, they will achieve redemption. And once redeemed, they can and will participate in the restructuring of the human societies in the 21st century in a way that will allow us to thrive. And if that happens, I suspect that we will end up where ultimately we should end up, and that is on the other side of disclosure, on the other side of contact itself, not covert contact in the middle of the night, followed by several table procedures that you would rather not have to do for whatever reason, and that's a complex question and I'm not going to get into here, but open contact, meaning you turn on CNN or you turn on the local news and it's Jaime Maussan interviewing a gray on Mexican television. That's open contact. On the other side of that, maybe that. In your lifetime, not your kids or your grandkids, in your lifetime. But the only way to there is through disclosure. And in order to get disclosure, we have to force checkmate on a government, at least. And in order to do that, I need the support of every person out there that wants the truth. If you want to know about the extraterrestrials, I need your emails, I need your tweets, support in every way possible over the next 3 months. Let's get it done. And once it's done, it can never be undone, no matter what terrible things come our way. From that day forward, we will be in the post-disclosure world. And more importantly, we will be able to watch every aspect of its evolvement, the reform and restructuring of human societies on our LED, ultra-high-resolution televisions, on email to our iPhones, on the World Wide Web in every manner and fashion. We will watch it every single day. Now that is some real good times, which I'm looking forward to with you, and hopefully again, I'll see you in Brazil. Thank you.